Hello and welcome to the DnD420 podcast. This is a show dedicated to helping you become a better dungeon master. I'm your host, Eric M. Hunter, and I am a struggling game master trying to figure out how to tell a better story. Joining me shortly is Jimmy Shields. He is the creator of DnD420 and an avid D&D fan for over 30 years experience. In this episode, we go over the characters that I had created from the last episode and dive into the importance of creating characters mainly about the background and story of those characters rather than the stats that they actually have. One of the things that I was trying to keep a secret or at arm's length with this game was the actual game that I am creating, and the reason for that was it's because after we get done with this and the game is set and we get ready to play, Jimmy is actually going to be one of my players. So I was trying to keep as much information away from him as possible. That way, when we get to playing, he won't be. So he'll still be surprised as to what's going on. So we kind of decided to go a different route with that, and I'm just going to start redacting information from him and trying to keep the homework that he gives me more general as possible, but yet we're still going to talk about the universe and stuff that we're playing in. So the game that we're creating is a game built in the Star Wars universe that's going to take place between episodes 5 and 6, and we're going to be the players are going to be part of the rebellion. So now it's a little bit easier to talk about, so everybody knows. All right, so I created my 3 characters. The one character was the character that I thought I would be more likely to play. The second character is a character that may show up more often than not, maybe a handful of times for give and take information. And then the third character is just kind of a nondescript, like you were saying, like a shop character with, I think, kind of an interesting kind of a quasi attribute that may or may not change the situation that they're that the players would get in. So first off, I want to describe the issues that I had, and then maybe we can kind of talk through it. So creating a character that I'm going to play is very difficult for me because there's a lot of things that I want to do. There's a lot of characters I want to play with a lot of facets and a lot of different abilities and feats and skills and stuff. So for me, picking a character is probably one of the most difficult parts of the game, which is, I don't know if you ever noticed, but like anytime we play a game in your world or whatever the world may be, I always ask you, like, first off, what kind of character do you need?
I like to do that too. I'm a big fan of doing that because I'll play anything, and if nobody wants to be the healer, I'll be the healer. If nobody wants to be the tank, I'll be the tank. I get it.
Right. So in this instance, as a DM, I'm struggling with the character that I want to play because I already know how this game is going to end. And, well, let me take that back. I have an idea of how this game's going to end, and I feel like the character that I'm creating, I don't want to create a character that's perfect. I don't want to create a character that is obviously going to be too overpowered. I don't want to create a character that
wins the day over the PC.
Exactly.
And you're facing the same problem that a lot of DMs face. Let me just tell you that right now. This is a huge debate on a lot of D&D forums as well, whether to play an NPC or not to play an NPC. Because, I struggle with it too. Because I like playing an NPC so I can roleplay when the group gets role-playing. I want to roleplay too. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So a lot of times, especially in one of my current games where it gets rolling and they're in the middle of nowhere, there's no people around for miles, and they're by themselves and they just get into a role-playing session around the fire. It's all I can do to be like, feel the ground shake, and try to put in a little mood thing because there's an earthquake going on. They just kind of ignore it because there's earthquakes all the time.
Right.
So I know what you mean. I want to play a character too. A lot of DMs want to, but how much do you get to play is the question. So you got to really make a character that is more interesting or might be more stat driven for the group. Like, what are they missing? You know, like, are they, oh, they don't have a skill thing? Well, let me play the skill thing. That way they can get through locked doors, they can figure out puzzles, they can crack, in their case, crack computers or fix ships or something. So, you know, if they don't have that. And that's what I typically do. But what I've been doing is providing a few options in gameplay over the course of a session or two. You'll meet several characters, and I'll kind of roleplay them up a bit and let the group choose who they're going to interact with the most. And it usually becomes pretty one-sided, or I get to play all three characters fairly regularly. But you do have to be careful, because you don't want to overshadow anybody. You don't want to steal the day. And often, if I end up playing like a rogue like you've made here, where you've made a scout, which is like the Star Wars version of a rogue in D&D.
Right.
It's great because you get to control what's going to happen in the game. Don't make anything the scout does the most important thing, and you're fine.
So that's kind of what I was struggling with once I built the character, because I was like, wow, this character's really cool. And like, again, it's a character that I'd like to play. But I also don't know what my players' characters are going to be. And if one of those character wants if one of those players wants to be like this scout, this rogue, that goes ahead to kind of see the lay of the land, then I feel like I've kind of wasted my time. Does that make sense? Like so when creating these characters for this game, should I wait until the players have decided, or should I just do what you just suggested, which was make, 3 or 4 different characters?
You took the words right out of my mouth. You should wait. Now, it's okay to make a bunch of different personalities, and that's what this is all about. You know, how do I save time? How do I have the best prep work? And that's kind of, I kind of gave you this task to see what you would do. You did a little too much work on your main NPC. That's not a bad thing. What you really only needed is that little backstory, and I'll make a few backstories like that. Maybe a name and profession, or quirks, character quirks. What's the interesting thing about this guy? We could say like, oh well, his name is Han Solo, and he's a smuggler, and he has this cool ship, and he's got a cool story about how he got this ship. Done. Oh, he's chaotic neutral, whatever the case may be. Done. Don't have to do anything else. Then you make another one. Okay, this guy's name is Darth Maul. He had a troubled childhood.
Yeah, right.
He fights with this double weapon. He's got a cool looking outfit, whatever the case may be. Done. Make a bunch of those.
So you're saying, like, when it comes down to the actual stats, like, you're leaving that to the very end.
It's the last thing I do almost in everything I write.
Gotcha.
I will spend, personally, weeks on backstory, because otherwise I would just be writing anyway. That's just what I like to do. Not everybody likes to do that. But these little one paragraph things that you got about each of these NPCs is great. That's all you need. The backstory there. Hey, he turned rebel against the Empire, did it for fame and money, the things he's interested in, the people that he's affiliated with, and a personality trait. That's excellent. This guy owns a bar. He hears a lot of chatter. So you're saying he's privy to information. That's good. He has a hateful view of a specific type of people. That's perfect. That's enough.
Okay. So because that first NPC, like I rolled dice, like I did, I re-rolled 1s and 2s, like I did the whole character creation, because I was like, oh, I'm going to take this literally. I'm going to take this as me making this character. And I was about halfway through it, and I was like, I'm making this guy who I may never play, because one of the players may want to be this scout. They want to maybe be this rogue character. And not to say that a group doesn't necessarily need 2 rogues, but it kind of... there's too many spokes. You know what I mean? Like there's too many other
Right.
classes that can make the group whole. I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
I think when you get good at doing this, what you'll end up with is something like this. What I did for my party, I have 4 NPCs here. It took me 5 minutes to make, and I rolled randomly for a couple of these. There's a guy named Murph Grizzledust. He's excitable, he's smart, and he's pretentious. That's all I have for Murph. Scobie is nosy, kind of obscene, and cross. Scobie is a rogue. Murph was a ranger. Schnagel Coppervein is constricting, unsympathetic, but he's versatile in his casting, knows tons of spells. And Kennelly, who's very alert, but really sensitive and touchy, and is a scout. So I've got these 4, and they're in a town, and the characters can meet any one of them depending on where they go. That's all I have for them. If they want to get into combat or whatever, I might click on some pre-generated stats if it comes down to it, or even just ignore them getting into a combat for that session. Oh, you met Murph and you really liked him? You want him to come with you? That's the option you took? Okay. The next session we're going to have a combat encounter. Murph will be involved. He'll know a little something. He'll give you a little piece of advice. And he'll be a level below the characters. He'll be pretty good at what he does, but the characters are going to be ultimately the heroes of the day. I just enjoy playing Murph. He's got some funny things about him. He's really excitable. He's really intelligent, but at the same time, he's pretentious. So he's got these neat things that came up at random on a chart. By the way, that chart that I used is called 1,000 NPC traits. I don't know who made that, but thank you. It's amazing, and they're numbered. You don't have to go random. You can pick, but just having that there as a reference tool so you can scroll through it, you can come up with combinations that are real and alive and fun to roleplay.
So that was going to be my next question. So it sounds like your priority is more about the mindset of the character, maybe the backstory of the character, and some interesting traits, and like the stats, for the most part, mean very much less.
At this point in the creation. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't put the cart before the mule.
Okay.
So right now, all we're trying to do is rustle up a group and turn them on with some cool ideas in this neat area that we're going to play in, right? That's all we really want to do. Is get people excited to play, right?
Right.
And write a little story together. So having a few backstories for 9 different people might take you the same time as making one NPC.
Yeah, from like start to finish. Yeah, for sure.
Correct. So later on, you might figure out which ones you want to stat out based on what the party picks and where you might want to place those and how many stats do they really need. You don't have a lot here, so that's the good news. You have the bones, the bare necessities, skills, feats, and abilities. So that's great. You didn't go into too much crazy detail. So that's the good news. Later on, you might find that you do this for 3 or 4 NPCs total.
So, okay, where do you get your inspiration for characters? Like, let's say you have an idea for a story and you have an idea where it's going to go, and you're like, okay, well, I need to fill this story full of characters. Do you look for things that you see out in everyday life, people that you know, or are some of the characters specific to the story that you're trying to tell? Does that make sense?
Both. I do both. I might watch a movie and get an idea for a character based on another character. I don't ever recommend copying characters, although you can, and no one is the wiser most of the time. If you just reskin that character, you take their personality or something you like about that character, and you reskin them. Most of the time, people don't know any the wiser. It doesn't matter. But you just have a colorful NPC, And sometimes they do know, and it's funny that they pick it out, and they're like, that's just like so and so from such and such.
Right.
But I also do say, recently I made a guy I met online into an NPC. He was just a cool guy. We shared some positive discourse about some D&D related things, and I said, I'm totally putting you in my world, dude, and put him in my world.
Almost like he's immortalized in your world.
He's immortalized. However, he's dead now. But
oh, that's unfortunate.
These things happen. Yeah. If you've got a colorful friend, put him in your world. Why not? But try not to put the friend of all the friends playing, because they'll know who you're doing, and that's not great.
Stick out like a sore thumb, I guess. Yeah.
I put you in many of my games, but no one's ever known.
Really?
No, I'm making that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. There's no way. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Let's talk something that's actually it's probably not top of mind, but it's definitely in the news. So what is your opinion of the Game of Thrones style of characters, where regardless of how much time you've put into them and how much you've tried to make them a point in the story, you kill them off? You know, so well,
in my realm, we don't call it the Game of Thrones style characters. We call it the Jimmy style characters.
Okay.
Game of Thrones must have been playing in my game at some point. So, no, I fully support it. I invest a ton of time into playing an NPC just to have them killed off. Making an NPC that just immortalizes them. It just does more for the NPC when it's all said and done. So I'm all about it, because still to this day, who's, in your opinion, who was the most righteous person in Game of Thrones history? Ned Stark.
Right. Yeah, and he died in the first book.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely Ned Stark. Because he didn't have a chance to be corrupted later on, you know? So he had to die when he did. Otherwise, he might be an killing bastard that you don't really care for anymore. I don't know, because that's the only way you stay alive. Game of Thrones, and that's the only way you stay alive. If people want to play neutral evil NPC, or not NPCs, but characters, people want to play a neutral evil character, you got to do so with tact, or you're going to die yourself. And I feel the same way about NPCs. I'm not going to say, I'm trying to have this element in my game personally, and I know a lot of DMs don't like this, and I know a lot of players don't like this. Hell, a couple of years ago, I had some really good friends who are great D&D players that didn't care for my game because it was too realistic. I don't like to use the word realistic, but I do like to use the word believable. I like my game to be believable. Because I want to touch on emotions. I want you, as a player, Eric, in my game, to feel emotions through your character, as your character. That's my goal, because then we've truly gotten into things that we can't do in real life. And it's an awfully nice thing to walk.
No, I agree. I mean, that's because, again, at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to what I feel is the heart of D&D, which is just telling a really cool, unique story that everybody gets to be a part of. And I feel like when it comes to character building, you always want a character that is going to last forever, you know, who's going to be the hero as a player. But for a DM, the idea is a little different. Like you want your group to do some really cool shit and have a lot of fun and, you know, create a cool story. But the characters that I create as a DM are, at the end of the day, are really just, they're expendable.
Absolutely, they are.
And
what you really want to do as a DM is keep everybody on track. That's really what you hope to be able to do, and do it in a creative way that doesn't feel like railroad.
Right. So, what are some of the advantages? We touched on a little bit earlier, but so what are like some really core advantages that we can take away from having an NPC that would be played by the dungeon master?
Okay, we'll go over advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are you get to have somebody in the group who might be in the know about things that they've missed, which is nice. And they might say something in a way that doesn't make them seem like the hero or the solver of everything. So if you are going to give a bit of information, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you do so in a fun way, in character. Don't just be like, okay, hey guys, you missed it. The trap's over here. Just
Right.
don't, but maybe do it in character a little bit more fun. Did you ever think to look over here? What I found, maybe found something else in that area that might give the characters an opportunity to see what they've missed. Or sometimes if it's their forte as an NPC, maybe they do have the answer, and that's okay too sometimes, but not all the time, and not in every situation. If you do it once in a day, it's enough. Because again, you want the players to be winning. The players, because when they win, like you said, everybody wants their character to be the big hero. Everybody wants their character to live forever. We put all this time into it to make the character and come up with a background. Well, we'll talk about that later. But and then you play 15 sessions and you're halfway into the story and your character dies. No, I've had it happen. It sucks, but also it can be some of the best stories. But I digress. Back to what we were talking about. I do that. This is DnD420.
That's what happens. You know it going in. You know it going in.
Yeah, you knew. It's called DnD420. So another advantage is the DM gets to play. I get to play too a little bit. Not necessarily throwing bones with everybody and overcoming the bad guy, but I get to play. For me, that's my favorite part of the game. If we don't ever roll any dice, I'm having just as much fun. So I think that's the number one advantage to having an NPC in the game is you get to interact with the characters as a character, in character. And promoting roleplay is what it's all about. You can ask questions that push them in directions. You can do all sorts of things. It's just a ton of.
So what are some of the disadvantages? Because like in my mind, like you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like the disadvantage would be like forcing the story forward, where it's like, no, look at this,
Right.
Or oh, I suddenly got a message from blah blah blah, and it's like a lot of that is obviously heavy-fisted, and the creativity to be able to do that in a meaningful way without, again, being heavy-fisted, I feel like is probably going to just come from playing more. The more playing you do, or even more basic things, just like like reading interesting books or watching a well-written movie, or listening to a podcast about somebody who's talking about stories and creating worlds out of nothing, basically.
Much like this one.
Much like this one.
But yeah, you don't want to you don't want to railroad your crew. Don't want to make them feel like there's only one choice. You don't want them to feel like they're one-upped either. That's a disadvantage, huge disadvantage, because we talked about that already as well, but that's the biggest one to me. Well, railroading is huge too, but the biggest thing is don't save the day with the NPC. You can make a statement with the NPC, say, oh, look, he's a badass. You can best them once maybe, but don't do it all the time. Don't make them feel like that your character, like you're the DM and you got the toughest character, and you're forcing the character to come along and he has all the best ideas. Don't ever do that. Then go write a book. Don't DM. Go write a book. If it's your story and your character and you're the big winner and you're the bad guy, just don't. That's the huge drawback, and that's what people are afraid of as players, And like I said, I've noticed it's a hot topic of debate in many forums that I'm a part of. And just yesterday or the day before, or whatever it was, I saw it going on. What do you guys think about a DM player that's DMPC?
Right.
Like, oh God, no, it's not a DMPC. It's an NPC for a reason. It's a non-player character. It's just another cog in your world. It can be a bigger cog that you have fun role-playing. Don't make it a PC.
Yeah, because from somebody on the outside looking in, or somebody new coming into this, like, it can seem like having that kind of character that the DM is playing, it's kind of a jack of all trades. Like, oh, this is my Swiss Army knife. He'll have the answer for everything. And
it seems fun.
Right. Who doesn't want to be all knowing?
Well, that's not what your job is. Either be a player or be a DM. That's the thing to take away from all this. You can't be both. That doesn't mean that there aren't games out there where people do this and they don't have their fun, and they all do it. Maybe I've been in a game where there was 2 players. I was a kid when I did this with my good friend Aaron. We were both the DM and we were both the player. We took turns doing scenes. I mean, if that's your dig, then do it. But a general rule is going to say be a DM or be a player. As you know, we're all grown up now. Don't waste your time railroading and one-upping, and just be a DM.
I feel like creating the characters, because I was so focused on the stats and stuff and the feats and skills and like weapons and stuff, that you get so bogged down creating these characters, and it's like, God, I just want to play this game. Like, I just want to create this character. I want to create this story, and just like I want to go out and play. And when you're looking at the Dungeon Master's Guide and you're reading it, and even the player's handbook, like, it's nothing but stats and charts and tables and
right. That stuff's already made for you. Don't spend too much time. And there are random stat blocks. You know what makes an NPC really cool is not the stats. It's how you play the NPC and what it means to the story. That's what makes an NPC cool and memorable. Because those stats, you can have the most generic stats straight out of the book. And if you play it well and it means something to the storyline, they're going to love that character. I found out with this Gladiator game I did, I had something like 27 NPCs, and they were at a gladiator school, a ludus. And so there had to be the guy who owned it, and there had to be the guy that was the teacher there, and then there had to be the guards, and there had to be all of these kick-ass gladiators, including a champion and somebody who challenges the champion. And then the players come in. So many of those NPCs were the same stats. Exactly. And I might give them a different weapon. Why? Because I had 27. I've got 3 of them that are these stats and this level. 3 of them that are these stats and this level. I might mix it up a little bit. But, I mean, they're cookie cutter because there's 27 gladiators here. I'm not going to make a character sheet for 27 gladiators. I made a character sheet for 7 of them, I think. Then I made shorter stat blocks for all the rest of them, just like you might do for a monster. But some of those side characters had such personality, randomly determined off of a chart, that was a little bit of a challenge for me. It was super fun having to play these guys. I had them hanging all around me. I was in the war room of NPCs, just hanging all around me on the walls and on my desk. And when they would talk to one, I'd have to look over at it and see what it was and kind of remember the voice. I'd have notes about the voice I would do and just try to remember the essence of it. And it was a killer challenge for me, and they loved it. Their favorite ones were those side NPCs with like cool quirks and cool voices or whatever.
Yeah, just nothing but personality.
Nothing but personality.
Yep.
Never even rolled a die for that character because half the time they were on lockdown, and that's when that character shined as an NPC, just during lockdown, because he was the guy that complained the most. And if you ask those guys about it, I guarantee you they mentioned that guy. And he was a level 2 warrior, a stat block straight out of the book. Had nothing but 3 personality traits. One of them was a complainer, and he was funny. They loved that.
That's all you needed. A complainer who's funny.
Yeah. And he was kind of stupid. He had a low intelligence and a low wisdom.
So I was actually getting ready to mention that. I'm sure I've said this before, but like this isn't my first game. This is however many games now. And I'm always learning. I'm still learning new things. But I feel like I realized today when I was looking back over the notes that I sent you about the characters that I created that, and it's more apparent to me now that you start talking about how I did more work than I should have. It's mainly about the personality and the backstory. The personality and the backstory help dictate what skills, what feats, and sometimes like what abilities that character's going to have based on that personality.
Absolutely, man. And so at this part of the game, let's not focus on those feats and stats. Let's focus instead on quick characters that are interesting so we can get to writing the story. That's the important takeaway from today is now that we've got, and I would encourage you to make a bunch more names with I'll put a name, a job title, a class, and a couple of personality quirks I might throw an alignment on there. And then later on, I might take these guys once I get a story and start to pick out NPCs. Like, you've already got a story, so this is easy. You're making NPCs that you need for your storyline. So now we need to know, okay, what are the actions that are going to be taken by the players in the beginning? Where are they? So we got a few NPCs now. Start working on where we are a bit more deeply. I know you've already got your place chosen. That's where we're on NPCs. But let's get deeper there. Let's pick a place where we can put these NPCs, a very specific place. And it's going to be just like making these NPCs. Let's give these places atmosphere. Let's give these places color. Let's do some things, not stat-wise, not too deep. Maybe a street name, a city name to go with it, a feel. Things that we can all relate to, things we've seen before, like this Murph Grizzledust. Reason people loved him is he was the excitable smart guy. We all know an excitable smart, right? Who's excited to share his information with you and add pretentious on it, and it's a lot of fun. And this is something we can relate to, though. We all know somebody like him. Let's put some places out there that we've all been to, and that way when we're in character, and they have to be cool places. It has to be something that can leave a mark on you. That way when the event happens, it feels like we're there with this guy and we can relate to it. So that's the next challenge, I think, is to come up with a couple of locations now that we're going to do some of the first encounters in. But not stats. We're not that far yet.
Okay, definitely. So I'll probably come up with maybe 3 more NPC backgrounds. Just because I'm in the mood to write those now.
I'm sure. Also, when you're doing that, another thing I want to mention, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I'll write 20 names down. And then across from those names, I'll write 20 things that might make a difference in my game. Because you've already got an idea of what's going on. So there might be somebody who is a risk taker. There might be somebody who has a badass weapon. And you're not necessarily matching that to the name yet. So you might be like, this is Murph and he's a gnome. This is Scobie and he's a dwarf. This is Bob and he's a titan. But then across the way, totally unconnected, you got a guy with a badass weapon. You got the guy who has a lisp. You could put a couple funny things that are serious to the story. And you make a list of those things. So let's go with 2 lists as well. Put 10 on each. You can roll a d10 if you want to. Now, the reason we're making this, let me tell you the most important thing, is that your characters, your players, will walk up to just anybody on the street and start talking to them, and you will not expect it. Okay? It's gonna happen.
No, yeah, that's huge.
You'll have a cheat sheet to add things into the story or give a little clues because you have this. They walk up to a lady. You got a few lady names on that list. They walk up to a human. There's a few humans on the list. They walk up to a smuggler. I got a guy who's a smuggler here. You get to talking to him. You might have something on the other side that now you feel like needs to go with him. Roll for it. There's 10 on the list. Roll a d10. Why not? It's a challenge as a storyteller. It gives you something that makes it feel like to the players that you planned for this, and it seems magical. So do that as well.
So 10 that character names.
Maybe with race or profession, whatever you want.
And then 10 traits. Okay. And then
10, things, traits, things about that character that make them interesting. Story plots or hooks, bits of information they might know.
Okay. And then the first setting.
I would do a couple, yeah.
Okay.
Try to do a couple. Because once you get your characters, all of these NPCs, and you've got a couple of events, and now we have a couple of places, after that we're going to start tying it all together. You don't need to have an idea. My method, you don't need to have an idea. You don't need to be like, hey, I'm going to write this story about slaying a dragon. A dragon has come to the realms, and he swoops down, and all these things happen. You can do that as a storyteller, but you don't need to. A lot of people ask me, how do you even come up with where? Like, sometimes I don't. I just start writing cool characters, and I start tying them together, and those characters write the story for me. These places write the story. Well, what is this cool smuggler that you've written, or this cool scout that you've written? And now that he's in this place that you're going to write this week, what would he do there? And now the story's writing itself. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, with the ideas that you've got that you want to keep secret from me because I'm going to be a player in it, these things will help you embellish your story as well. So if you've already got a cool idea, this isn't the type of thing that's just for people who don't have ideas. Adding more to your story is never a bad idea, because this side flavor that we've created, these lists and all these extra NPCs, you're going to be thankful you did it later, because it only takes a few minutes. And if you don't use them, you can put them aside. And I put up all of mine on index cards, and I'll have an index card with 5 NPCs. Once I've used it, I set it aside, and I may have made character sheets for them then, or I may have done something else with them. Then the card becomes next to useless because I've used everything on it. But then I've got 10 more of these cards that I haven't even touched. If I don't use them in this game, there's no levels here. There's nothing here that I can't reuse somewhere else. And if there's things on the plot line stuff on the opposite side from the character names, I can take that stuff off and fill in the blanks and reuse this. That's just another way to save you a ton of time, man. Just a ton of time. I see DMs wasting so much time writing way more than they need to because they don't even know if the characters are going to pay attention. It's the number one complaint that I hear from DMs on DMs only websites and posts and forums, is my characters didn't do what I think they were going to do. We can solve that. We don't have to fall into that every single time. After 30 years of doing this, I learned how not to fall into that trap. Because it used to be that I'd write big, cool, elaborate stories. My players would go the opposite way. They'd run from it. It sounds too dangerous and scary. We want to go over here and dance with these fairies. Okay.
Right.
So those fairies could have something to do with the story next time. We'll just have to talk about it in a few weeks when we get to that point. Your characters aren't doing what you think they would be. But for now, we'll work on these these key locations. I would do 2 or 3 of them. Depends how much time you want to spend on. Don't spend too much time on either of these. You've learned that from the NPCs. Just enough that you can create a feel and ambiance, connect it to something you'll sense. And I think that'll get us into the next.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the DnD420 podcast. For everything DnD420 related, check out DnD420.com. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us there on the website and on YouTube at DnD420. Lastly, as always, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by telling another DM about the show and by visiting us on Apple Podcasts and leaving a rating and review. Thanks for subscribing and being a part of our work here at DnD420. We will see you next week.